Hey there, this is Patrick with Dallas Hockey Hangout, coming to you after a 4-3 Stars loss to the Chicago Blackhawks. Forgive me, I'm a little under the weather and have been, so haven't been able to pod as much as I'd hoped. But yeah, what a day to pod, because Dallas is not playing well, and that mixed with, so it's 4 straight losses for Dallas, and mixed with the pretty notable USA roster announcement this morning, and Stars forward Jason Robertson was left off Team USA, and I'm pretty surprised. Biases aside, I thought he would make it. I really thought he would. I thought that he'd shown enough in the past year between, the Four Nations tournament and, now that, he took his game up a notch. And I'm not really sure. I'm going to try, so it'll be interesting, but I'm not really sure what aspect of his game Team USA does not like. I'm genuinely confused, surprised, as I'm sure a lot of other Stars fans will be waking up seeing this news. So we'll get into the Stars and their play in a bit, but I couldn't help but lead with Jason Robertson not making Team USA. I'm not here to throw shade at anyone, any player that made it. That, I'm sure, there's roster construction. There's, not every line's going to be a scoring line. So some of the guys we'll talk about here, there's other aspects of their game that make them valuable to Team USA. And largely, I like 95% of the players that were named to this roster, and don't want to leave out Jake Onger being named as well. I mean, tough game against Chicago, but I think largely he's been really solid and exactly what we, come to expect from Jake. Consistent, makes the elite level plays that can change a game, and is more often than not the team's best player on the ice. So congrats to Jake Ottinger. But yeah, let's just go through some numbers. I'm going to read off these numbers, and you, the audience, tell me which players should make Team USA just based on stats. We'll get into everything later, but we'll go with goals and how they rank with the league leaders. So we've got one player with 13 goals, 36 points, pretty good, ranked 63rd in the league with 13 goals. You got another player with 10 goals, 22 points, ranked not in the top 100 in goals. You got another player, 9 goals, not ranked in the top 100, 22 points. You got 16 goals, 30 points, ranked 36th in the NHL in goals. And you've got 18 goals, 46 points, ranked 28th in the league in goals. And I think we know you've got player 24 goals, 48 points, third in the league in goals scored, and 8th in the league in points. So it's not all about the stats, but I mean, it seems pretty clear, and like just based on the stats, it seems pretty clear that Jason Robertson is the best of these other 5 players I named. So we'll go back through them and just I'll give my take on them. So some of the guys I thought that, I'm not saying he should have made it over this player specifically. I just think that there's a pretty strong conversation to be had. But, you have Kyle Connor. I think it's interesting, at least how, I'm perceiving it. It looks like Connor's like kind of one of the last forwards and is not even in a line, at least how he's listed. And the graphic I'm looking at, whatever. But, Connor's one of the extra forwards. I really like Kyle Connor. I think, having watched him a lot in the battles with the Stars, I mean, he's oftentimes the Jets' best player, especially even with, when Nikolai Ehlers was on the Jets. I mean, he really is a spectacular player who's got great speed, great shot. I'm really excited to see him on Team USA. But when you compare 18 goals to 24 goals for Robertson, there's a conversation to be had. It's nuanced. I'm not here to, like I said, rip any of these players, but also just calling it on both sides. Robertson does play for the Stars team that's got a better offense and is playing overall better this season than Winnipeg is. And, no offense to Comrie and net, but, they don't, they don't have their best player, Winnipeg. They don't have, Hellebuck for the first part of the season, and consequently, the team is not playing as well. Shocker. We'll move on to Brock Nelson, which is really interesting to me. He's got 16 goals, 30 points. That's I'm a little surprised. Like, when you just, again, no shade on him, but like, I don't know how you can look at Brock Nelson and Jason Robertson and be like, oh, for sure, Brock Nelson. Like, I don't see that. I'll get into my reasons why later, but this one, I think, to me, is pretty telling. I think there's been some injury issues with Vincent Trocheck this year, but 9 goals, 22 points. We'll talk about the next guy too. I think there's a narrative here, but I mean, to me, I don't know how Trocheck makes it over Robertson. I think this is pretty clear and above like a head scratcher. I really don't understand that at all. I like Trocheck's game. I think that he's gonna, I was talking about roster building earlier, that he's gonna fit in that bottom six and be a grinder and a hitter, which is just kind of crazy to say for like a team filled with so much talent, that somehow they could say, oh, you know what, we need some sandpaper on this team, which I get it. But like, I don't know, if I was the coach or GM, I would be like, hey, star players, we're going to need you to hit. We're going to need you to check, like, oh, what you have to do all of the rest of hockey. So if you've watched Jason Robertson this season, he can hit, that he's a really, really good two-way player. And he's got an elite scoring touch, as evidenced by he's third in the league in goals. And yeah, like, I think playing with Mikko Rantanen certainly gives him a boost. But I mean, again, we'll get into some of the reasons why I think he wasn't chosen a little later. But I certainly think that people just aren't watching Jason Robertson enough. That's the only kind of thing I kind of can go back to, because I don't know how you can see what he's doing this year and leave him off the team. I just feel like you're probably not watching him if you're making that decision. So anyways, the other notable guy that made it here is JT Miller, who's got 10 goals and 22 points this year. Trocheck and Miller are both on the Rangers. That's there seems to be some sort of a narrative there, given that, I mean, look, it's New York. It's the mecca of sports, so to speak. And I'm sure someone there has some sway, but the Rangers are second to last on the Eastern Conference right now. It's deep. The East is really deep this year. They're 3 points out of a spot. But that said, even with the recent slide, the Stars, Stars are second best team in the NHL. A big part of that is because Robertson has been crushing it this year. Yeah, I mean, if you look at Robertson's shooting percentage, it's not even as, outside the lines high. He's shooting 15% this year. And you've got, Scheifele's shooting 23. Like, Natchez is shooting almost 21. Like, Marchand's shooting 22. Brian Marchand's had an incredible year this year. So I'll move on. It's just a little confusing with, why two Rangers would make it. And, they seemingly are not really having that good a season. And then, like, I do really like Clayton Keller, and he's been, a pretty big reason why, Utah is playing as well as they are this year. And I think his speed and creativity and playmaking ability and just kind of ankle breaking ability, I think Team USA needs that, because, Canada's got it in spades everywhere. But I really like Keller. So I don't want this to seem like, I think he shouldn't have made it, but he only has 13 goals and 36 points this year. So, I mean, compare that to the 24 goals and 48 points for Robertson. Yeah, it's all very perplexing. I'll get into why I think he didn't make it. I think people don't watch the Stars enough. I think that's got to be a pretty large factor here. That's not bias from me. It's obvious the league does not watch the Stars very much. You know, maybe it's the Central Division times. Maybe it's just that they don't have the sexy player. I really don't know why, because this is, one of the most exciting Stars teams they've had in recent memory, especially given the addition of Mikko Rantanen. So yeah. And then I think the knock on, Robertson is just that maybe he's not as physical, but I mean, I really am not understanding that as well. Just given, he's a big body and his goal is to score, not check. So I'm a little confused by that narrative. And then, you know, having watched him his entire career, we know he's defensively responsible. He's plus 15 on the year. So, part of that on a good team, sure. But, for comparison, Mc, McKinnon plus 51 or McDavid plus 1. Like, McDavid has been on the ice for a lot of goals this year. And, are we going to sit here and say Connor McDavid isn't a good defensive player? Because we all know that he is and can be when he wants to. But guess what? He's being paid to score, not defend, like largely across the board. So I really don't like that narrative. That I can't wait to see what it is and who's willing to actually go out on a limb. I'll throw this out there. Bill Guerin, former Star, have always enjoyed his time with the Stars and have had the pleasure of meeting him and speaking to him a few times. And he's as professional as it gets. Um, I'm still perplexed that him being with Minnesota and seeing Robertson up close, that you just wonder how Bill Guerin being with Minnesota plays into it. I'm not saying that there's a bias, but, I just wonder if there's maybe a dislike there flat out. I mean, the Stars don't like Minnesota. Minnesota doesn't like the Stars as far as organization, players, fans. Like, that's a pretty heated rivalry, in my opinion. Actually, someone was asking me about who I think the Stars' biggest rival is. And I think, based on, you have your Edmontons and Vegases of the world, and given the complexities of those matchups, and maybe it's not a rivalry because Dallas has dominated recently, but if you ask me, I think the Stars' biggest rival right now is, between Minnesota and Colorado. Dallas has dominated both of those matchups in the playoffs. So it's not much of a rivalry, but of course, like, we know that those teams have incredible talent, and geez, with Minnesota adding, Quinn Hughes, I mean, they're just even better. I still think Minnesota's lacking a little bit of offensive punch, but that's fine. Like, they're still really, really good. So I just wonder if there's a little bit of bias setting in. It happens. Bias happens all the time. Groupthink is a thing. And it could be that weird bias, us Jason Robertson supporters. Like, maybe we all are not seeing it. We're all bought in, saying, he is such a great player, should have made it. Like, we all know this, but I mean, maybe it's not as clear as we think it is. Obviously not. He didn't make the team, so it's obviously not clear, but it'll be interesting. Would never hope for this at all, but it would be very interesting if for some reason there was some sort of injury, who they might call up. Who would the next person be? Is it, is it Robertson? Won't get lost trying to pick out a few people, but I mean, I can think of a few others that would probably be considered. So yeah, how are you guys feeling about Jason Robertson being left off? That's pretty surprising. And, I think a lot of Stars fans take it personally because they know how good he is and how important he is to the team, and how seemingly unclear it is why he's not making it. I'm really interested to see the reasons. So, me personally, I'm pretty surprised. I really thought he was going to make it. I think it was the Wild reporter Russo that had the story a week ago that was suggesting that maybe he wasn't going to make it. These things are talked about for a long time. I'm sure that this list has probably been decided for a little bit, and he's just been on the outside looking in for a while now. And I mean, if you're him, keep doing what you're doing, Playboy, because what you're doing this year is working. So just keep doing it for the Stars. And I had tweeted originally when I saw the news, like, man, if Robertson was playing with a chip on his shoulder between Four Nations, him not making that team, and now he's going to be playing the rest of the season with an entire mountain on his shoulder because, you know, I can't help but be pissed off for him. And I would imagine he's pretty pissed waking up this morning reading that he's not on the team. But that said, I did want to note that I saw some good quotes from him, saying that, he can control that. And right now, all his energy is just focused on helping the Dallas Stars win. And, as a fan, deep down, that's all you really hope for. Like, go Team USA. No denying that I'll be the first person yelling about how cool the Olympics are and how pumped I am and how excited I am for Team USA and how great that Four Nations tournament was and how important that can be for the sport of hockey. But that said, like, there's part of me that's like, well, Robertson, at least he won't get hurt. He can get some rest. He's still coming, let's not forget, Robertson had an injury leading into last season that hampered much of his season. And then he gets going and then, has, I believe, if I memory serves me, another injury late in the season. And then that hampered his playoff run. And, being some of the criticism levied at him, maybe is not quote unquote showing up in the playoffs. Like, well, there were a lot of stars that, didn't quite have the postseasons that they'd hoped for, but, no one's sitting here, ripping them or using that as some sort of reason why they're not as good. It's just like, it's, specific to the Edmonton series. Like, man, that was a defensive series. And, if memory serves me, he was one of the better players in that series against Edmonton. So yeah, really shocked, frankly, that he didn't make the team. Pretty disappointed for, the Stars fans and his family and all that. It's just really perplexing. So kind of transitioning, and we'll just be a little quicker about this, but transitioning to the Stars loss to the Blackhawks. Yeah, it was a close game, I thought, until, you've got two pretty backbreaking goals early in the second and then early in the third. The power play goal 13 seconds in to the second is just a pretty big gut punch because you're feeling good after 1-1, I think. It was a pretty even first period. What a goal by Mikko Rantanen. I just don't want to forget about that because there's really not a ton of other positive things to talk about for this game for the Stars, but an incredible goal from Mikko, and for him to just make that look way too easy, because that was way hard and he made it look super easy. Incredible backhand, and be able to elevate in tight like that, and just his hands in tight it's just incredible. It's just so great to have him on the team. He's just one of a kind. But yeah, I mean, that Stars give up their second power play goal of the game, early in the second, boom, it's 2-1, and you feel like you're immediately chasing, and then it's 3-1 midway through, and that feels like a pretty big hole to come back on the second night of a back-to-back. And, Dallas is just, they didn't have it defensively. I thought that, to me, that was my biggest criticism of the game. I thought that they're just not in sync defensively, and it seems like the communication was off, because I think it was that goal by Teravainen, which, with Bedard not on the team, I think there's a pretty strong case to be made for Teravainen, being their next best skilled guy. So for the Stars to lose that guy in the slot wide open, yeah, that was pretty tough. And then, like, Essa, I noticed on that play, is he gets kind of a little wrapped up in, the wall with whoever he's covering. And I thought, that's pretty far away from the net for Essa to be. Not that it was on him, but obviously Dallas was very confused on that play. And it was kind of one of those things went really right for Chicago on that. Also, I don't want to forget to mention, it seemed like Dallas could have had several more goals in the first. Like, they had a couple posts. So did Chicago, but I mean, this could have been a very different game. And yes, when you fit it into the narrative of, Dallas right now, as far as, hey, they've lost four straight, including two to the Blackhawks. Yeah, they are struggling right now. There's no denying that. But also, like, this very easily could have gone differently if Dallas had gotten a little bit more puck luck in the first period. And, also I just didn't really understand. I don't understand how the Blackhawks, who were also not the best defensively, took their first period of the game, midway through the third period. That, I don't know. I was a little confused by that. So, then to me, this is the biggest goal of the game, the Mikheyev goal to start the third period. Man, that's a tough one to give up if you're Jake Ottinger. I can't remember many quote unquote soft goals like that from him this year. That might have been the worst of them, which is unfortunate to see because Dallas really, like, I did think they had it in them to put a good period together and, you know, make a, make a go of it. They've proven that they can erase leads quickly, and they've proven that they can do it in Chicago too, especially that pretty notable comeback for a win. And they scored how many ever goals in a couple minutes to win. So it can be done there. And obviously they showed late, get a couple, um, you know, they pull Ottinger, they get a couple goals, is what it is. It's, 4-3 on the scoreboard, but it was really more like 4-1. And, you know, let's just look at the comparables, because I thought it was pretty interesting to see, just looking at the actual team stats of it all. I thought just really, Dallas was better in the faceoff dot. They out hit the Hawks, but, if you've watched the Stars long enough, you know that they're typically being out hit because they have the puck a lot. Now, I'm curious, maybe in one of the future pods, we'll maybe look into Dallas's physicality and how they've been hitting this year. Traditionally, they're like bottom of the league in hits. So can't wait to see where they rank now. But, the one power play now, special teams and goaltending, obviously Razor will be a big proponent of that, as am I. The Stars were not better in net, and they weren't better, in the power play and the penalty kill. I mean, the penalty kill is kind of struggling right now, but, it is what it is. It'll come back around. These things wane and wax. So, even on block shots, not as many takeaways, a few more giveaways. But yeah, I don't think that, you know, if you didn't see this game and you saw the score, it actually might reflect how close it was for most of the game, just from a play standpoint, not score, but play standpoint. I thought it was a really even game. But that said, Dallas has played way better defensively this year, and it sticks out when they don't play well defensively. Look, their last four games, all losses, they've given up 4 goals. I mean, that's uncharacteristic for the Stars, because, their 4-game winning streak previous to that, they gave up a total of 8 goals. And, in this 4-game losing streak, they've given up 16 goals. So easy math would tell you that, defense is just not playing as well, and the goaltending is not performing as well. Look, I'm going to say this a lot, but it's a long season, a really long season. Like, we haven't even hit the Olympic break yet. We're, almost midway point of the year, and, there's a lot of hockey left to be played. And, not for nothing, but just so happened to be coming across this as I was doing some of my research this morning. But yeah, the recent, team rankings for power rankings for ESPN still had Dallas as the second best team in the league. And that's after their 4-game losing streaks. Sometimes that stuff gets put in before all that and whatever. But I think it's pretty clear Dallas is still one of the best teams in the league. They're just in a little bit of a funk right now. And, they play a really good Montreal team on Saturday. And Montreal is, let's see where they are in the league. They're third in their division. They've got the 4th most points in the East, and they're 2 points back of the Red Wings for first in the East. So, I think that, it's not going to be easy on Sunday. I don't know if I said Saturday, but Sunday. It's going to be a tough game for Dallas, and I think they could very likely be looking at another loss, but that's just because of how close the league is right now. Um, look at Chicago. I thought both games Dallas played them, Chicago played really well, especially considering they didn't have Connor Bedard. I thought that, they were fast. I thought they were creative. I thought they were aggressive. I think that they have a unique way of getting Dallas out of their defensive structure. So I think, too often when a team is not playing well, you're, quick to look at, maybe what's the stars of that team did not do well. But, the other team is playing as well. And Chicago is much better this year. Spencer Knight was pretty good, I thought. I mean, he made 22 saves. I mean, it's not the best save percentage, but, he's been better for them this year, and their goaltending has largely been better. I think that he's been pretty good for them. And I think that just as a team, they've had better net minding. I mean, he's 11-11-6 on the year. So, I mean, his, headed into the game, his save percentage was 910. It's 909 now. And, Andres right kind of in that mix as well. So, if we're going to say Andres great, I think that Spencer Knight deserves some credit for how he's played this year. And, Chicago, called them the worst team. I'm doing a lot of air quotes today. So if you're watching on video, it's a very conjectured day. But yeah, I mean, they're not as bad as people think. And they're not even the worst team in the league, at least statistically. Now it's Winnipeg in the division. So I think that, depending on Bedard's health, I could see him getting healthy and Chicago making a run in the second half of, this season. It's a long season. There's a lot of games left to be played. And, right now it's Utah that's kind of the team up there. But I mean, Chicago's just a few points back of them. A lot can change quickly. Yeah, pretty disappointed in Dallas's defense, and obviously their scoring has fallen a little bit. And let's talk about those numbers again. In their 4-game win streak, they scored 22 goals, and their 4-game losing streak, they scored 10 goals. So they're giving up more, they're scoring less. Pretty easy recipe for failures. That said, I mean, Blackhawks playing better, Red Wings, best team in the East, Sabres are 110 straight. I mean, which is just crazy. I mean, the Sabres story. It's kind of cool, honestly. Largely not typically rooting for. I root for Lindy Ruff, that's for sure. Lindy Ruff is a good man and a great motivator of people. And there's a reason he's still in this league, obviously. So, definitely rooting for him, and was, frankly, a little surprised that, that they didn't fire him, just because that's what NHL teams do. They fire way too quickly sometimes, and, wouldn't have been surprised if he got the axe. So I'm so glad to see that, he's doing well, and largely that Buffalo is doing well. So 3 stars of the game, I think, yeah, Mikheyev for sure. It was a little surprising to see that he only had, I think that was his 8th goal of the year, both of them 7 and 8. From the outside looking in, you'd have thought that he'd have had more, given, some of his, shooting, and he really had it Thursday night. So definitely first star for him. Um, Yeah, I'll give Burakovsky 2nd star. I thought he was, he's got 2 assists, and, pick who you want from some of the other guys. But, and then, because this is a Stars podcast, we'll put Mikko as 3rd star. But, given how lopsided the score was, like, I'm sure you could pick another Blackhawk. So we'll give Mikko 3rd star. Dallas has some areas of their game to clean up for sure. That's, but that's always going to be the case, though, right? I mean, it's like I said many times, it's a long season and there are going to be dips and there are going to be aspects in which Dallas has lost their game and they're going to refind it. I think, looking forward, Dallas has Montreal at home on Sunday, but then Dallas goes out on a 6-game road trip. And, I think that's actually bad news for the NHL because Dallas is one of the best road teams in the league. There's just no denying that. But that said, it is a really tough schedule coming up. So, wouldn't be surprised to see them, let's say in this 6-game road trip, let's say they go 3-3. I could see some sort of narrative swelling like, oh, maybe Dallas isn't as good as we think they are. Well, they are, but they have warts like any other team in this league. There are holes in their team, I think, on the defensive side. And then, obviously, we haven't mentioned any of the injuries the Stars have gone through this year, but the fact that they are still the second best team in the league, given some of the injuries they've had, is still really impressive. And so one of those guys, Duchesne, is coming back, and I think he's playing better and better. And, conversely, I think you can see this team misses Liam Bissell right now. His physicality, his confidence with the puck. I hope he gets back soon because maybe Dallas is missing some size as well, especially with Labushkin and Niels being some of the smaller guys. So I think that is a facet. But yeah, let's look at the upcoming schedule for Dallas. So you got Montreal, but then the road trip starts with Carolina, Washington, San Jose, and then LA, Anaheim, Utah. Like, pick one of those teams and tell me which one of those teams is not good. If the casual fan would say Utah, but we already talked about them previously, they're much improved this year and they're right there to make the playoffs. So largely, I think that story is really cool. And I really like Clayton Keller. I think he's a hoss, frankly. I think he's one of the best players in the league and not surprised that, he made Team USA. But I mean, Carolina, in my opinion, a top 7 team in the league. Washington, pretty easy opinion, top 10 in the league. San Jose, budding with arguably Hart Trophy candidate Macklin Celebrini coming up. LA, Dallas has had their number and they're not playing as well this year, but I mean, they're still one of the best defensive teams in the league. And then conversely, they play Anaheim, one of the best offensive teams in the league. And, Dallas put it on them, with an 8-3 win recently, but, I still remember that 7-5 loss and early in the season and remember that as a little bit of an eye-opening moment for Anaheim. So, yeah, and then they close with Utah. So it's not going to get much easier. Dallas is going to have to find their game quick if they want to remain. I don't know. Like, would you even, like, the tough thing, we'll close with this, like the playoff standings, it kind of is frustrating knowing that unless Dallas can catch Colorado, that it's semi-likely that they'll be a 2 or 3 seed. I don't see them falling to a wild card. So it's kind of, they're locked into that middle matchup that they've kind of been in. And I think it's pretty clear that that needs to be changed, but not because it's affecting Dallas. I think it's just pretty clear that good teams are matching up too early in the playoffs. And I'm sure the NHL has done that to, because it is a long playoffs and you want those exciting first round matchups that they can really sell. But yeah, it just feels like some of the, wildcard teams shouldn't be getting the reward of, or some of the Pacific Division teams shouldn't be getting the reward of better seeding. I don't know. It's just all very confusing, much like the Jason Robertson snub of Team USA. So we'll call it there. Tough day for Stars fans all around. Dallas loses 4-3 to Chicago and, now they are great about picking up points, but, it's back-to-back regulation losses, which Dallas hasn't had a ton of. It's only 9 this year. So that's not happening very often. So interesting to see how they sort things out. If it's a energy thing, if it's hey, maybe if we just capitalize at certain parts of the game, it'll be really interesting to hear the messaging and where this team is. They're not going to get too high or too low. So I'm sure that, this dip in play isn't, overly worrying. But that said, tell that to the end glass of United Center because geez, Daddy Miro is upset. Stars lose 4-3. You guys have a good rest of your weekend and talk to you after the Montreal game. Adios.